Welcome everyone, I'm Yessíca Torres. We're here today to talk about departure theory, our current exhibition. We have an all-female panel this time, which is actually really kind of fun. We haven't done that before yet. And these artists have come from as far as Colorado. Today we have 2 artists from Colorado and 1 from Los Angeles area, so we're really happy about that. And I want to go ahead and introduce, so we have Bronwyn Strickland. She is from Dolores, Colorado. June Kim on the end, she is from Los Angeles. And Linda O'Neill from Lafayette, Colorado. These ladies were chosen to be a part of this exhibition, not just because they're just, look at their little gorgeous smiles, not because they're lovely ladies, but because we really thought that there was something special about the work that was entered and thought it would be a wonderful addition to this show. And so far it has been. So we're closing today talking about them as individual artists, their work, and also their contributions to our wonderful exhibition. So Linda, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and background and whatnot?
Sure. Hi everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm Linda O'Neill, and I live in Lafayette, Colorado, which is actually a little bit east of Boulder. So I usually tell most people I'm just from Boulder, and it's, you know, a beautiful area. And we came from San Francisco Bay Area about 19, 20 years ago. So I grew up in Marin County in California. My background a little bit, my education, or, okay. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts, and my emphasis was printmaking. I went to a private college in California, and the printmaking I was doing was monotype, on paper, ink on paper, and it was abstract, and so that was where I kind of started to get really interested in abstract work. And that was a while ago. I graduated in 1993. So when we moved to Colorado, I wasn't really painting at that point because I'd been working for Lucasfilm in the Bay Area, so I was doing digital art. I was painting on the computer, basically, creatures and objects and things like that for motion pictures and commercials. And so when we first came to Colorado, I was looking for that type of work. And it was a little more difficult to find than in the Bay Area. So that sort of steered me back towards fine art. And for a while I was had my own business doing digital work for people, just sort of on a one-on-one basis, photo restoration and, you know, kind of a variety of things. And then I started painting again. I really missed it from my school days. And that's what brought me back to abstract work. And so I've been a painter for quite a few years. Have a little studio right next to our house in Lafayette. It's in a rural area, so it's really enjoyable to paint. The colors and the light in Colorado really inspire me all the time. So that's, yeah.
Wonderful. June, how about yourself?
I have lived in LA for 15 years, but originally I'm from South Korea. So, and I went to school called Art Center, College of Design in Pasadena. So I studied, actually I started from figure drawing, which is everyone does. And then I was more interested in more architecture and then more like environmental design. So from there, I took actually many different classes. And eventually I majored in motion graphics, which I actually surprised you worked in Lucasfilm, because in daytime I also work as a graphic designer, motion graphic designer, work a lot of digital computer art. But my passion was always making 3D sculpture, and I'm really focusing on these days making a fiber art, which is using a lot of thread, and building more bigger scale, a more challenging, more installation and 3D sculptures these days. So that's what I do.
We're glad you do it.
Yeah.
And Bronwyn, how about yourself?
I'm originally from North Carolina. We used to live in Dolores. Actually, between applying for this show and coming here today. We moved to Durango, which
Oh,
is just
okay.
like an hour from Dolores,
Oh,
so
okay.
it's still in the neighborhood, but just wanted to
Making a
clarify.
note.
Yeah. So let's see. I've always painted and sketched since I was a kid, but I actually do not have a degree in art. I was a bit of a nonconformist growing up, and still kind of am, but really very much so a nonconformist in my youth. And so even though art was something I loved and something I seemed to have a natural talent for, I didn't want to study it. So I ended up getting my bachelor's degree in Chinese language and culture from Arizona State University. I had been to China once before in 2001. I ended up through a very long, twisted path to get my degree in 2010. And by the time I went to China after I got my degree, it was very different from the first time I had been. And I had this story in my head of what it was. And like every country, it has its positives and it has its negatives. And I had that realization of like, oh man, this just isn't what I thought it was, and I don't know if I want to be a part of this. So I left, and I did all that hard work basically to learn about them, and then just felt this huge disappointment. But it was mostly on me because it was, what I perceived it would be. Anyway, there was a lot of hard growth inside of myself with that, a lot of self-examination, and ended up in rural Colorado for my husband's job. Followed him there, and that's how we got to Colorado. I was working some odd jobs and realized that I didn't actually have a career, and started to go back to what I loved in the first place, which is art. And so it was a very conscious decision. He and I sat down and decided, instead of me just working jobs that I was unhappy at, start intentionally making art my career. And so I've been painting because that's what I knew. And I've basically been figuring out this artist business ever since.
I think we all are. It's definitely, we're all still trying to navigate and figure it out.
Yeah.
Well, I want to move into your process just a little bit more. And you'd said it, I actually made a note of it earlier, and you had talked about in your biography, a tale of nonconformity.
Yes.
And then I looked and I'm like, she has a degree in Mandarin Chinese. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Your art, it feels nonconformist. You do have that, it's not a theme, but it is this tone, I would say, throughout your work. How does a nonconformist, for one, I know you explained the Mandarin Chinese a little bit, but how's a nonconformist, what was that? You said you were really influenced by the stories from your parents. Were they also that way? And then another, something else, and I think that was probably at least what I kind of deduced was why you went into Chinese was your love of different cultures.
Yes.
And you had made a mention that being from North Carolina and the cultural background there was something that really formed you. How do you feel as an artist that those things all come together, and how are you able to get those out?
Okay, I'm going to try to remember everything.
I threw a lot at you.
It's okay.
I threw a lot at you.
I think there, especially with my parents, my mom, before she married my dad, did a mission trip. She's a nurse, and she was a nurse in Madagascar for 1.5 years. And so growing up in my house, we had all these African trinkets all over the home. In the Appalachians of North Carolina, I mean, it was very different there. And then my dad is a stair builder and self-taught, and so in carpentry. So and he does these magnificent, sweeping, spiraling stairs, and they're all handcrafted. So I guess I looked at what they had done with their lives and said, well, I'll make my own path too. Why not? And then, let's see.
No, that's a great answer. I
Okay.
threw a lot out. You were able to condense that in like one sentence. Fantastic.
Yeah.
June, I want to ask you as well, being from South Korea, and you've mentioned this many times, I know, throughout kind of your biographies and artist statements, is that what you do really is trying to connect these two cultures that you've experienced, and whether it's born in South Korea and then your experience in the United States. Your work is so intricate. Everything you do is this tiny, in a way, it's very, very tiny, but on these large scales. How do you tie those two cultures together, being both Korean and American?
I think by a lot of big conceptual influence that I chose the red thread, the material based on is actually Chinese Asian belief, which is they believe red thread is connected to all the significant people you meet in your life. It's already connected with the invisible red thread. So which means everyone in this chair, we're destined to meet together today. And these two artists, Linda, like everyone here, Yessíca, like we are all have an invisible red thread connection. So this, I was very interesting because they believe you are trying to break it, it never breaks. It's always there. It can never broke. It's more like destiny. And I was thinking about everyone I met in my life. How can I visualize all these people that I met in my life, like this one sculpture? So this is kind of visualize invisible human connections, and this is very abstract, kind of my imagines personal map in a way, network. So so it started from, I guess, Asian influence, but I came and lived here, and I met people here, and I grew up as an artist and a human being, and I'm just try to almost like making all this mark, like, and then building all this network with my sculpture.
Kind of like a permanent record through art.
In a way, it's like, personal infographic. Like, and those like dots number are based on my Facebook friends number. So I want it to be topical. People are using social media. I use Instagram and Facebook all the time. And then somehow these days, how we meet people are not always in person. You get to know somebody through online, and you also feel connected. And you can be someone like me, like I can only connect to my mom and my friends in Korea on Facebook or some social media, but I feel like they're always there, We're living in such a different world these days, and all
Absolutely.
these things, all become my sculpture.
Linda, looking at your background, and you had mentioned it just now, and I think while making that big move from California to Colorado, and it's evident in your art that you do use Colorado as an influence. I have to be honest with you, I really just want to hear about Lucasfilm. So, and I really want to know how that that transition from going to printmaker to a digital media basically, and then now into fine art. And there is a particular, in this particular piece that we selected, there was something about it, which I'll come back to later, that I think maybe makes a little bit more sense now, knowing your background in Lucasfilm and printmaking. But please enlighten us on Lucasfilm and your time there, and then how that is sort of, how that transition was from digital to fine art.
I have to think about that one. Lucasfilm was really interesting because I'm really not a computer person. My husband is in that field, and but I enjoyed that work because it was very technical in a way, but it was also very creative because of the type of work that I was doing there. They had sections, different departments, like there would be someone that would build the model, then there would be someone that would put texture and kind of bring the the model to life a little bit, and then they would send it to us in our department, and we would put color, make it beautiful or the way it's supposed to look for the movie or the commercial. One commercial I worked on was creating a chameleon, and so all the little detail, the color, the scales, the color of the chameleon. Then it would go to lighting, and they would, make sure that the lighting was going to be right on the creature. And it was also, then after that, would go to the animators. And so it was a little bit, it was 2D, 3D, it was kind of everything. So it gave me a really good education, I think, in a wide variety of art, just color and light and texture and all that. And so it helped with my, fine art background, just kind of combining the two. And then there was part of it, though, that wasn't very satisfying. Because of that, we were all working in really dark rooms, for 10 hours a day on the computer. And you go a little kooky after a while. And so it was thrilling, and it was really fun to be part of that industry. But I think when we got to Colorado, and I couldn't find anything that was quite the same excitement and, enjoyable as that was. And I missed painting. I missed the tactile part of not working on a computer. I wanted to get back to the paint and the brush and the canvas and sort of the personal expression.
Yeah, more of a solo effort. I mean, you're working as a team, and then now, maybe you're creative, at least kind of what I'm hearing is that your creativeness was not necessarily stifled, but essentially changed by others at some point, right? It's when you're in a team, you only have this much of a voice.
Right.
It's a solo effort, which is one of the things that, like I said, makes sense now talking about your piece. What we selected for you is this huge, it's sizable, but it's also bright. There's so many colors that you've pulled. I mean, there's colors in nature, there's colors that obviously are not nature, but, could be kind of maybe thought to be spring, and then one element that you have was a lot of actual pens and markings, and there was this almost street art element to it, which felt rough and felt, I don't want to say forced, but in a way very intentional. And it was an interesting combination of the two to have these soft colors. And if you haven't seen Linda's piece, I'm referring to the piece at the very front when you walk in. We loved it so much we put it in the front as so everyone that was walking by could see it. It's a huge, huge addition to the show, and it was something that immediate when we saw it, there was absolutely no doubt about it. It was going to be entered in the show. It was, and it is kind of a long title. It's We Can't Keep Spring from Coming, which was obvious that it was an influence in your surroundings and you're pulling from nature, but you had this sort of rigid element to it too, and so I think it, at least for me, I can kind of see now where that comes from a little bit, blending those two experiences together. Your piece specifically, was it an entire series that you did? Because we only get to see so many of the entries in the body of work when they come through. Was it a large series? Was it having to do with the seasons? Is there anything particular about that piece that we should know about?
Yeah, I think that there is that intensity to it. I'm really interested in the light and dark aspects of being human. And in that, I mean, for me personally, I've dealt with migraines and OCD most of my life. So there's a part of me that's very intense and can be anxious, and that need to express that part of myself, as well as, the light part of myself, the part that's pain-free, the part that's happy, the part, and everybody has those qualities, it's just part of being human. But I think that's the sort of graffiti type roughness, because when I start a painting, oftentimes I'll take a pen or I'll take a crayon or something and I'll just start writing on it, like whatever I'm feeling that day. If it's anxiety or, being really mad at somebody, I'll just start writing on the canvas. And then to me, some of those are the underlayers of the painting, sort of the underlayers of being a person and a human being. And then we all have those layers like an onion, layers on top of that. And that's where some of the color and, you know, the combination together, I think is, you know, the light and the dark, because I think in that painting in particular, there's some areas that are really dark, like the black cross, you know, and then there's the light that's kind of coming down behind it.
Yeah, it's very extreme. I mean,
yeah,
it's an extreme
yeah.
piece. At first, you don't feel that when you're staring at it, only because you do have all these bright colors, and it kind of makes you feel good. But when you really get into it, and I would kept referring to these little squiggles as these little surprises that would sort of pop out at you. And it is a very extreme piece for something that is, but it really kind of comes out over time. You know, it doesn't hit you. You're not offended by it. In fact, you're very drawn to it. You know, well, there are pieces. Don't offend anybody. And by offensive, I just mean there's something that is controversial about it when it isn't, but it is extreme in its own way. So
right.
I can see where that comes from. We're very happy to have it. So thank you.
Bronwyn,
I do want to talk to you. We actually chose your pieces in a pair, and we knew by looking at your portfolio that we were going to have to take two. There was no way that we could only take one, in part because of the compositions were so simple. At least for me, when I looked at your work, I felt, well, this person has something to say, and I don't know that one is enough for the show. I feel like we need to have almost like a little story. And the ones that we chose were in the river, and when you see them, when you come in, there's two side by side right up front. In the River has the predominantly blue, obviously, and then the other was Next Level Woman that had more of the gold tone. And what's interesting about those pieces were at first glance, especially when we have to view these portfolios digitally, they are predominantly white. You know, they have this big white background with these big, beautiful sort of bursts of color and a lot of motion. But when we got the pieces, it was sometimes we have these expectations and we're sometimes don't get what we want. In this case, we got more than we bargained for, and we're pleasantly surprised. We had all of these layers. I mean, and kind of like Linda, you know, working with a little bit at a time, there was so many underlying things that were going on. It wasn't just this crisp white with just a simple color. You have layers and layers and layers.
Yeah.
And please talk about those for us.
Okay, sure, absolutely. So with all of my work, I will say that I don't paint what I see. I paint what I've learned. So, and it's just what I've learned through life, and that is always changing. And so, yes, all of my work has many layers because there is an element of minimalism. Some people might look at my work and be like, you can be more minimalist than that, you know, but then I just have a blank canvas probably. But I do try to keep things simple, and I start with white. And sometimes I will put, I mean, they all have layers, but I will put elements underneath the white even it's mixed media. So there's paper under there, there's ink, there's sometimes burlap. No burlap in these.
No, but you can tell that there's a texture behind there. So whatever you're using, but then at the end is very crisp and clean, though. I mean, I appreciate the clean corners. I appreciate the you know, both of them feel as part of a series, even though they can stand on their own individually.
Right.
Within the River, you would describe that piece as sort of basically subconsciously that we travel through life, and while we may express a fear of death, really subconsciously we don't, because we continue to move forward every day.
Yes.
And that was something that, you know, yes, the piece is somewhat literal with the title, but you can find so much within the work itself. You know, In the River can really mean anything to anybody, but when you expressed it as, you know, when we're looking at this subconsciously, like we continue to move through life whether we like it or not.
Right.
And that was something that really struck me with both that piece, and then you move on to the gold piece, which was feminine. You didn't have to say it was feminine, but it was an obvious feminine piece.
Yeah.
And you actually said something about, and you might want to clarify this for me because I can't remember off the top of my head, but women really grabbing from their own breast or bosom to, you know, and that's kind of how they navigate life. So
yeah. Well, with Next Level Woman, it is, even though it's non-representational, it kind of does represent a feminine figure, and in the center is this very black circle, and that is to represent the heart. And it's black because for me, it's not so much, you know, a darkness of evil, but a darkness of healing. And so if we go there and spend time to evaluate ourselves, to find out where we've been wounded, maybe not necessarily fix it, but just observe it, that's going to the next level. That's showing up as an adult and not a scared little girl, not being scared of the dark, but healing there. So that's
It's
Yeah.
you know, you use the word healing, and both of your pieces do have this calming nature to them. They're both, I mean, they're design-wise and visually they're stunning, and you know, they're a great addition to the exhibition. But you know, when you're really trying to break down a piece of work that you might want to take home and put on your wall, hint, hint, in case anybody wants to, that you want to be able to live with a piece that you can connect to. And I think that was something that was evident with your entire portfolio, but specifically the two that we chose felt this connection that we have.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
yeah. So June was a no-brainer as well when we were looking through portfolios. When she applied for the show, both my gallery manager and I, Cameron, we knew instantly we had to have one or all of what you had. And I think we actually asked you for more. Right? We don't care, we'll fit it, we'll just fit it in. We don't care where it comes from, we just want it. The work, I can tell you as a curator, there is something within myself that I look for. And the only way to describe it is different. I'm attracted to things I haven't seen before. I'm attracted to things that make me think, and even if I don't necessarily like them, I will come around because I want to know more about it. And with your work, it was unlike anything I had ever seen. We have, I know both Cameron and I have an affinity for installation art. It's something different. It's something that, come on in, have a seat. It is something that is unique to every artist, and it's so powerful, and partly because of the size, partly because of the, you know, the grandeur aspect, that big wow factor. With your work, we had to have it, and specifically, we focused in on your intersection series.
Yeah.
Now, you touched on it a little bit before about connectedness.
Yeah.
What I want to know is, how did it all come together? How did you make a 6 foot by 6 foot square come together? What was the process of that?
I mean, conceptually, what I do, like knots and intersection, they have the same concept, but visually, I definitely challenging to be original, like what you just, you know, I try to be very innovative in terms of using materials and all the design that I went through. So I had this concept of idea that I wanted to express a human relationship. And I got this influence from red dress, so I got all this material. How can I make this visually even more appealing, and how that can deliver my idea? So the reason why I chose plexiglass, because I want people to look at the thread, but I need a structure, invisible structure that people see through. And all these boxes and the knots, there's a clear acrylics or representing the life stage. But when you think about life stage, you can think more linear perspective, which is beginning to the ending. But also you can create the whole world, like with the box. I mean, it's very, I don't know, like abstract thinking.
Well, and I think that was something with, so you have, for those of you that aren't familiar, so intersection is obviously the very large installation we have, and then you have two smaller versions with the same, I guess it's the, how do you say this? You have one negative and one positive with the same shape, kind of the smaller version of the larger installation. And those were all unique in themselves, but Knots really was its own, it really does feel like its own universe. It's completely encapsulated. You have, you know, you can see probably, I would say maybe at minimum 4 or 5 different perspectives will give you a totally different piece on this when you really move all the way around. And that was something that really drew, I mean, we had to have that one no matter what, but that was something that has garnered a lot of attention throughout the exhibition. There's a lot of conversation going on a daily basis, but it felt the most intricate as well. I mean, that really felt time consuming. It felt like you really poured everything you had into that piece.
That's probably just describe, I pour everything that I was trying to, it's really impossible to my whole life with the one sculpture, but that was my earliest work. The first one, model for every sculpture is related to knots. So intersection is it's almost baby from knots.
It does feel that way.
it is
Even though the
baby.
size is quite big, it
Yeah.
definitely doesn't have that intricacy that knots has. Now, it's not a negative. Obviously, you have to, explore and try different things. But knots really it is a truly polished piece.
Yeah.
It's really, there's nothing. Every edge lines up. Everything's perfect. I mean, it really is probably, I would say, one of the best sculptures we've ever had here, by all means.
That's interesting because that's my oldest sculpture, but I can relate it to what you said because it was a model for all the sculpture and intersection born from knots. So I created this like a huge landscape of personal map, and I chose specific section and then enlarge as an intersection because as an artist, I wanted to make some like big statement, which means I was challenging bigger scale, which is I still didn't reach the scale that I want. So knots initially I made it for small model for warehouse installation. So this I made it for pitching for the bigger scale. So
And is that where you're going next? Is you want to do this?
I want to
very
get
grand-
bigger.
You want to as big as you can go.
Yeah, but it's not really about the size, but also making a big size is challenging as artist technically, because I have to organize a team. I have to work with the constructor and engineer, so it's more of a practical challenging for me. So I have this idea how I can go further, like go more but it's a one idea but expanding.
Where do you see yourself going from here, or are you already working on your next project?
I'm actually already, it's all starting from drawing, right? I already have maybe like millions of drawing for next upcoming series of sculpture, but I wanna go two direction, which is one big installation warehouse size. I mean, don't you wanna walk through the knots? I mean, if it's like
Yes,
really huge, And then I can shade like setting up the light, and then I can you can see the shadow really big, and then you walk through in a shadow. You're kind of trapped in these circles, which is we all like have a social circle, and then social circles are always like interacting each other. It gets bigger and it gets smaller. When people get old, they have a tendency to get actually more smaller, but all these things are very organic. So that is one direction, big scale, and then I want to make actually work piece so that people can collect. And it's a more business choice that I want to also sell. I want to be a professional artist that I want to live by like making art. I have a like digital art career as working as a designer. I also make a film titles, and which is very satisfying because I learned something, and I always express myself daily basis. But still, I'm serving other people's commercial like profit,
Yeah.
So fully to be able to be a big artist, I feel like I have to live, by selling art.
Yeah.
So the work piece is more of a choice that I want to explore.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I have no doubt you're going to get there. I mean, I really don't. I mean, seeing,
Yeah.
and I understand the process and what artists go through and how they explore, and
Yeah.
some things work and some things don't. But if you're going to continue to think forward and continue to think bigger, I think you definitely will get there. There's no doubt.
And I want to make a lot of different variation for knots and intersection.
You will.
Yeah.
I can see it. We'll have them back here.
Yeah.
Linda, what are you working on next?
I'm continuing in the same vein where I think when I start to work, I don't have a real preconceived idea. I tend to work very emotionally in the moment. So a lot of times I don't really know what the painting means until it's done. And so I tend not to work in series because of that, because I want it to be really raw, and I don't want to have like, oh, I'm going to do this, and there is that aspect to the painting. You have to be very aware of the composition, you know, while you're doing it, but you also have to separate that from feeling free and not worrying about it too much. It's part of my problem is getting out of my own head, you know, when I'm painting. And I think to be really successful as an artist, you really need to do that. You need to get out of your head and let, you know, whatever is deep in you, you know, to come through on the canvas, because I think that's what people relate to.
I imagine
You know,
your studio with like 7 canvases, all with giant stories written on them.
That's,
like
yeah.
Okay.
I usually like to work on,
You're always working on something next.
yeah,
Like,
I usually like to work on about 4 to 6 pieces at the same time. I also want to go bigger. I'm, you know, 48 by 48, I really like that size, and I like the square size.
Yeah.
But I also would really like to try something really big. I think expressively as an artist, it's easier to express myself that way than working. I find when I go back to work on small pieces like on paper or even small canvases that it's really hard. You know, I feel constricted and like I'm not sure where this is going. It's really enjoyable, and I do like to work on paper, I think because of my printmaking background. But there is something very freeing about the large pieces. So I want to kind of continue in that vein.
Bronwyn?
I too am going bigger. Actually, I just finished a rather large piece. It's 48 by 72 inches on canvas. And it's extraordinary, and I love being beside it because it's much larger than I am. But what I'm focusing on quite a bit is blogging about my work because there is so much happening. They're very complex pieces. What I put into them material-wise, but also just the philosophy behind them, what I've learned to bring to them. Sometimes people don't want to know, and that's fine too. You know, it's all up for interpretation. But if someone does want to know, I really want to walk you through it. There's a lot of symbolism. Yeah, so just the blogging aspect, really communicating what the work is about, because it's not just design. It's for growing, for learning, for expanding. Even if it's just me doing it, that's there.
Wonderful. Before I open up the floor for questions, we always do a little bit of questions at the end, just in case anybody has them, they can start thinking about them. I want to pose a question to our panel today. It's only because we have an all-female panel, which is for the first time. Do you think, as women, there's something that being a woman specifically adds to your work? Do you think that there's something maybe that it takes away from? Basically, how does being a woman artist influence what you do, or does it have anything to do with it at all? Go ahead.
Oh gosh.
You first. You may.
Man, well, I don't want to go first.
You don't have
okay,
to.
Yeah.
I was actually just messing with you. You don't have to.
I need to think about this.
Well, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Here, I'll start it off. If you want, maybe this will give you. What I see from women is they're a lot more in touch with what's going on. No offense, guys. I do think that men are aware. I think we're all personally aware. But there's something about being specifically a woman that gives us hopefully a little bit more perspective. And maybe we tend to think things out maybe more so than we should. But there's just something, we're really trying to be so rounded in everything that we do that we're overthinking this, and there just feels like there's more going into it than maybe just a blanket statement. You know, there's every little fiber of us. And I don't know if that's specifically feminine. To me, it feels feminine because as a woman, that's how I feel. But that's kind of what I see, and it seems to be an underlying tone with all of you. There's so many layers to everything that you do. They're not these, they are simple maybe and visually, but it's not. It's never simple with women. So
That's true.
You're welcome. No, I'm just kidding.
I think
Thanks for saying
I'll just answer my own question. I'll answer my own question.
I was going to say too that for me, and I think for women a lot in our culture generally, is we have a hard time expressing ourselves sometimes, and we don't feel like we have a voice. And painting gives me that voice, and sometimes I, don't even know where it comes from, but I think the writing on the canvas, however people interpret it, it gives me a voice when sometimes it's really hard to express what I'm feeling or what I'm thinking about the world. I think that's an important thing for women, is to be able to express themselves in that way and in some way to make a statement about the world around them or themselves. And that comes through, I think, in women's art a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like women artists definitely more focused on healing. I hear actually a lot of women artists talk about emotion and healing, and you just mentioned lots of layers. So I guess we're very complex anyway. That doesn't mean our men are simple or anything, but I guess we're very complex, So to be able to display a lot of different kinds, all these like various feelings or all these so many things, we're very sensitive with feels and we want to able to express. So I guess it becomes there's a lot of layer, even if it looks simple. That's very interesting, and I think it's really interesting. Many women artists say that it's healing, because I used to say that too, and I realized a lot of people saying, so I kind of stopped saying that. But definitely art making is very healing process and very therapeutic. And I gotta say, the more my work gets more honest to myself, it's more therapeutic. So I don't know why so many people have I think
that might be true for any artist too. I mean, artists will create because they have to. It's not, if you're really an artist inside, you're creating because it's something you have to get out, not necessarily something that you're just maybe not just trying to sell. I mean, obviously the commercial aspect is important. It's what supports us, but you're going to create no matter what. If we never sell another painting, there's literally just going to be 1,000 paintings in our garage. That's just how it's going to be. So there is the healing aspect to it, but we have to create that no matter what. So.
And I think that goes into, I've been studying a lot about archetypal energy, which is, Carl Jung, the psychologist, had these ideas of archetypes in our minds. Whether you're a fan of Carl Jung or you hate him, it doesn't matter. There's this concept that we have these parts in our brains where there's, like for women, there's a queen, there's a mother, whether or not we've actually given birth to a human child. There's the warrior inside of us, the lover. And I think there is that mother aspect to us that needs to create and then nurture our creation. And so I think that also comes through in the art, because that's exactly what it is. Yeah, so
You did it.
I did it.
I want to go and open the floor for any questions that we have. Feel free to just pop up your hand. Anything.